Okay. Hi, everybody. I am Arie Engel, the Director of Creative Community for Peace. Thank you for joining us today. We have people literally tuning in from all over the world, including some of our panelists. For those of you who don't know, Creative Community for Peace is a nonprofit entertainment industry organization comprised of prominent members in the entertainment community who have come together to promote the arts as a means to peace. To learn more about our work, please visit ccfpeace.com. That is ccfpeace.com or creativecommunityforpeace.com. We have a fantastic panel discussion today with leading members from the Broadway and theater industry who are going to discuss the current state and the future of the industry. With theaters closed, no entertainment sector has been hit harder. That is certainly true. For all of those joining us in Zoom, you can see a Q&A button at the bottom. Please feel free to leave questions. We'll get to as many as possible towards the end of the panel discussion. To briefly introduce our panelists, first we have Jamie DeRoy. Hi, Jamie. Jamie is a producer who has won 7 Tony Awards, including for the production of The Band's Visit, The Ferryman, Angels in America, amongst others. Next, we have Kurt Deutsch, who is a Senior Vice President of Theatrical and Catalog Development at Warner Chappell, where he oversees the signing and nurturing of theatrical composers and develops new theatrical projects. He is also the president of Shookaboom Ghostlight Records, which has won 3 Grammy Awards for the original broadcast recordings of Book of Mormon, In the Heights, and Beautiful, the Carole King musical. We're also excited to have Nina Essman with us today. Nina is the general manager of 321 Theatrical Management. Their national tour management credits include Wicked, SpongeBob Musical, Bring It On, the musical, Sister Act, and many more. Next is Stefan Schick, who is a partner at Loeb and Loeb, who is a noted entertainment attorney whose practice focuses on live theater. Stefan represents a number of Tony Award-winning clients and advises on all aspects from financing to development and production. His clients have played key roles in such recent and upcoming Broadway and West End shows as Almost Famous, Beetlejuice, Chicago, Jagged Little Pill, Mean Girls, Pretty Woman, and School of Rock. Finally, there we have him, Mr. Andy Senor, who is joining us all the way from Korea. He is both an actor and a director. Most notably, Andy played Engel in Rent for many years, in addition to now directing its productions in Cuba, Japan, and South Korea. Other projects of his include On Your Feet and Holiday Inn. And finally, our moderator for today is CCFP Advisory Board member Craig Balsam. Craig was the co-founder of Razor and Tie Entertainment and recently won a Tony Award as a producer on Hadestown. Craig, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Arie. So we will jump right into this. I'll tell you one brief story about why I'm moderating the panel, which is I was a lead producer of a show called Hangmen, which was supposed to open on March 20th this season. And on March 12th, I was at our final preview before we started to have press come in. And I left the theater.
March 11th, was it?
11th, March 11th.
March 10th.
That's March 11th. So I left the theater on March 11th and felt great about the show. And I got out of the theater, I looked at my phone, and the NBA decided they were going to cancel their games going forward. And I knew that was kind of the end of what we would think would be theater. It was kind of incredibly devastating. And now here we all are trying to figure out what's going to happen, what's the future of theater, where is this going, and not just as it relates to Broadway, but as it relates to live theater in the US and throughout the world. Broadway theaters, small theaters, not-for-profit theaters, everybody is completely affected by this. So I thought I would throw it out to, since I'm seeing your face here, Jamie, I thought I'd throw it out to you to start. And I think it's not worthwhile really to speculate when, the date that it will be coming back, because there's a lot more information that we're going to need to figure that out. But let's just start talking about when it comes back. What do you see it? What form do you see it taking, Jamie?
Well, that's a hard question. I think nobody knows that either. I read that Cameron McIntosh was saying that as long as there's social distancing, there can't be theater because they're the exact opposites. I've read all kinds of things about, I would assume they're going to have to reduce the occupancy, but if they have to reduce it too much, it's not a viable model to make any money for anybody, and everybody across the board would have to be reducing. So it's so tough. And I saw you at Hang and the last weekend before before all fell apart. It's so devastating. It's really hard. I don't know how you go to the theater, especially a comedy, and not be sitting in a big group. I mean, when you're at a comedy and the theater's not full, it doesn't feel the same. The actors don't feel the same, give back from the audience, and that affects them. Even in a musical too, these key points. Something should get a laugh or a reaction. If you don't get that reaction, it does something to your performance. I don't know that as a Broadway performer, but I know it as a cabaret performer. And I always felt like if I didn't get a laugh at a certain thing, I worked at the Monkey Bar steadily for 1.5 years, and I would do certain songs. If it didn't trigger something, I'm like, I'm in trouble, I got to work harder now to get them in my corner. So I don't know.
That's one aspect.
Ask somebody else.
Well, one aspect, what you're saying is the creative aspect of it, which is how do you forget about the economic aspect of it? How do you actually play to a theater where the seats are sparse and the actors and actresses are feeling concerned about, feedback, right? Because all theater requires some kind of feedback every night. What about the commercial aspects of it? I mean, Charlotte St. Martin has already said very recently that she can't see Broadway coming back at 30% occupancy, which is what she thinks it would need to be. Nina, what do you think?
I agree with Jamie. I mean, there's the financial element of it. It's not generally a profitable business, as we know. It is sometimes. And I suppose there's a universe where everybody cuts their expenses by 70% and the landlords don't charge rent and the actors get paid 70% less, and the advertising is 70% less if you're only going to be able to sell 30% of the tickets. And I can't imagine you can sell them at the price we've been selling them for. But more importantly to me is what Jamie was saying. I literally cannot visualize that experience of being in a medium to large Broadway house that's not full. It's not the experience that the show is created to have. It's not the experience that I just don't think it will deliver. I think it will be incredibly disappointing for everybody who's on both sides of the stage.
Stefan, what would have to happen for that to actually happen? Because you've got how many unions? 6, 7, 8 different unions to negotiate with.
That, I think it's 12 to 13.
All right, there you go. So what would actually have to happen if indeed we are looking at a situation where everybody is concerned that Broadway's never going to open because of whatever else is going on? How do we figure out a way to get there?
It would be a monumental task to get everybody to buy into the new economic model, right? So, I mean, it's a lot of players involved, but, to be somewhat of a contrarian Pollyanna here, I do think that at the end of the day, people will want to have some live theater in some form instead of no live theater. And even if that means actors, being uncomfortable with the response that they're getting from a house that's 30% full or 50% full, my hope is that people will sort of rally together. Theater has always been an industry of we're all in the same boat, right? That's the way theater economics work. Is that if nobody can do well without everybody doing well, right? If the show is suffering, everybody suffers. If the show does well, everybody does well. And so in that spirit, it's at least theoretically possible that you could have all of the unions, all of the royalty participants, all of the stakeholders, the producers, the investors, sort of look at it and say, okay, well, our revenue streams are going to be cut by 50%, maybe more, right? I mean, it could be 70%, like Nina was saying. And so, everybody has to take their minimums, their minimum weekly fees, reduce those even further. And then, there would have to be some arrangement where once you've paid back the investors, then you open up a much larger share of the profits to try to make all of those people whole who took those kinds of cuts. And we've seen that model for certain shows on Broadway. This is not kind of an unprecedented model. I think I didn't work on the show, but I know from representing investors on it that Network used that model where the stars and the royalty participants all took minimums, and then they made something 30 or 50% of the profits available for sharing once the investors were paid back. So
when it got to 110%, then it kicked in.
Right. So
Let me stop you there for 1 second. So Kurt, do you, having dealt with investors in your different projects, do you think investors would be willing to invest if that was the situation?
I think it'd be a hard investment to make. I think that at the end of the day, it's all about safety, because it's not just about being on stage and having an audience there. It's like, who's gonna, when you're talking about costumes and you're talking about and feeling safe in the theater, not just for the audience, but for everybody on stage. There's so many people who touch things, who touch people, quick changes. It's just, there's so much that goes into live theater that until people feel safe, I don't think people are going to gather in the same way that they used to gather. And I think that part of Oscar Eustis, I read an article today that Oscar said, he said, I can't see us gathering until there's a vaccine. Or yes, at least until there's
not a social distance medium, basically.
The theater's just not a social distance medium, and so so people are looking at alternative ways of. I mean, we're seeing so much streaming things happening right now, streaming theater, streaming plays, maybe seasons that are set for next year and not for profits will be streamed for subscribers. I just think that it's all about safety and it's all about gathering, and forget about making money in the theater right now from an investment point of view. It's like we're in survival mode. So
exactly. So I want to circle back to the streaming thing in a minute, but Andy, I just wanted to ask you, so to respond to what Kurt's saying about safety, because I know that you perform, but also to kind of check in with you on what's going on elsewhere in the world. Tell everybody where you are and give us a little bit of an update.
Hi guys, so it's 2 a.m. for me. I am in Seoul, Korea. I just finished my mandatory quarantine this morning, and I start rehearsals for Rent here in South Korea in Seoul on Wednesday. I wish we were doing this in 2 weeks or next week, because I feel like I am going to learn so much this particular week as to how this is done. Theater is alive and well here, but that is for a culture that is used to issues like this. The cultures over here are used to going to theater and wearing masks and sitting next to each other. It's just part of the culture. So we could, again, I'm such a novice at this, and I'll know so much more. But we could look at economic things, like crazy. But it really comes down to, yes, safety, but how comfortable will people be? What makes somebody feel comfortable? I'm somebody who flies all the time. I live in Barcelona. I work in Asia, United States. I'm always on a plane. I'm always comfortable. When even just flying, let's just, just getting on an airplane 2 weeks ago was making me crazy. It was something that was making me, just the idea was making me crazy. When I got to the airport and I saw that everybody was wearing masks, it calmed me down. It the seeing how the measures that in the check-in, going through security, the measures in getting on the plane, like seeing everyone working in cleaning and hand sanitizer, and everybody was wearing a mask. That's when I felt comfortable, and that's when I had a sense of like, okay, this is fine. This is, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So I think it's
Are you in rehearsals now, or?
I start on Wednesday.
Okay, so you don't really know how that's going to go yet. Have they provided you information?
But there are shows here that are running. Phantom of the Opera is running here, and from what I understand, they're not doing any. They're not cutting back any seats or anything. But again, it's a culture that is used to that.
From what I understand, they're taking people's temperatures.
Yes, they take
as you go in. There's plastic on the seats now, where they're so that they can replace the seats. They are taking pretty drastic measures that to make people feel safe.
Exactly, and they're communicating like crazy. All over. I was quarantined somewhere else, and then just walking today through the city. There's all sorts of lots of communication constantly, which makes you feel alert, and but people are very relaxed here about it all. But again, the cases here are in the single digits.
Well, they've also been through other kind of less extent pandemics, so they're used to this fire drill, so to speak. Whereas we're not, and our customers are not. And so my next question really is, for anybody who wants to jump in, how do we get people back in the seats, even when, Mario Cuomo says, okay, we're in phase 3 now of the return, and we can start opening closer places like theaters. How do we get people in the seats? Who wants to jump in on that? Nina, you want to take a shot?
I don't know if I know how we get them back, but I think people won't come back until they feel comfortable, and until I personally think that that group events are the last thing that's going to come back, that theater is going to be the last thing of those group events, and that Broadway is the last of that. Because I can visualize people being more comfortable going to the public theater, which has 5 spaces and they can open 1 or they can open 2, and they're smaller and it's different. I think the bigger Broadway theaters, both financially and just, again, by feel and experience, I think it's gonna take a while until people are comfortable, because I don't think we can come back until we can really do it properly. I think it's just
Stefan, do you think we're going to see
the tourists that are coming in have to, want to come and want to get on a plane and want to do all this?
Correct.
Well, that's yet another issue, which is we'll get to as well. But I wanted to ask Stefan, do you think that the theater owners are going to need to do something to make sure that they can cover the costs of keeping everything safe and clean? Are there going to be other kinds of negotiations that go on between theater owners, producers, unions about that, and who's going to cover that cost?
Yeah, certainly the theater owners will have to be one of the many parties at the table. They're a major cost to shows, even in normal times, right? And they will certainly be looked to make concessions along with everybody else. But yeah, right. In terms of who's actually going to disinfect the space, I imagine the theater owners will want to pass that cost along to the shows, and that will just be one other cost that gets negotiated. You know, in keeping with this idea that everybody's going to have to take minimums, you know, it may be that the theater owners agree to some arrangement where they're getting no or much reduced percentage rent, you know, a percentage of box office, but maybe the fixed costs are slightly higher to cover those kinds of expenses.
So let's assume that Nina is correct, that Broadway is the last thing back. And I do want to get to a discussion about not-for-profits and smaller theaters as well, but let's stick with Broadway for a second. That's a long time from now, pretty much. I mean, unless there's some kind of vaccine. So what Kurt was mentioning earlier, and I want to go back to Kurt on this, what do we do as people in the theater business to keep theater in the minds of people and to continue to keep our audience engaged and excited about live theater?
I think that I mean, I run a record label, then I have 200 Broadway and off-Broadway cast albums, and one of the things that I've been really focusing on is making sure that when the theater is dark, the music lives on. And how do you perpetuate the fact that right now there's 32 dark theaters, but there's still an incredible appetite from people all over the world who want to consume musical theater and want to consume the music and want to listen to music. And you have performers all over the internet, Broadway performers and benefits and streaming musicals that you can watch. I think that now is a time to reflect, to engage your audience, to build an audience, and also to develop. Writers are writing still, musicals are still being developed, and we just have to be ready for when it is safe to go back to the theater, for all of us to push the gas pedal and have amazing product for people to see. I think it's going to be a lot easier if there's a big star in a show. People might want to go see that person on stage, because if that person who they look up to feels comfortable performing in the theater, they're going to want to actually see him. I know Hugh Jackman was performing in The Music Man. If Hugh feels comfortable going on stage and performing for everybody, then an audience might feel comfortable. And Broadway is going to have to engage in a big PR campaign around safety, around feeling comfortable. And if the actors are comfortable, then I think the audience will be comfortable.
Well, I will say Brian Stokes Mitchell has a little audience every night when he stands on his balcony and he sings. Exactly. So people are willing to come to that. They might be willing to go into a theater to watch somebody like Hugh Jackman. That's not untrue.
Can I also add something, Craig?
Sure.
I think that, sorry, Andy. I think that there is a distinction from a safety and comfort point of view, in my mind, between the people who work in the building and the patrons. The people who work in the building are people we know. Obviously, we will do everything we can to keep them safe, but there are protocols we can put in place that we can enforce because they are employees. And there's the same group of people week in and day in and day out. And so there are protocols that you can put in place, and they can feel comfortable with each other. I mean, I think Kurt's point is well taken, that if the company feels comfortable presenting the show, we hope that the patrons feel comfortable watching the show. But I think that the safety element for the community of people who work in the building is different than the safety element for the strangers we don't have control over coming into the building, which is our audience.
Andy, did you want to jump in on that too? You seem like—
I was just like, Kurt, what you were saying about the campaigning for people to come back to Broadway just reminded me of when I was in Rent on Broadway during 9/11, and we took those pay cuts in order to keep our shows open. And I remember we filmed this beautiful commercial in the middle of Times Square, inviting people, come back to Broadway, come back. And it just like, so this conversation is so reminiscent to me of that particular time.
So Charlotte St. Martin at the Broadway League has said that, you know, they're preparing to a budget to get people back in the same way, Andy. But yeah, but Jamie, I wanted to ask you, so it seems like, you know, a couple of Broadway producers, big producers, were in conversation with Governor Cuomo. Governor Cuomo has this task force to return, which they are not on, although Charlotte St. Martin has said that they're comfortable with the communication lines that they have to Cuomo. Mayor de Blasio also has a task force with nobody from the arts on it at all. What do you think that means for Broadway? Do you think, or theater in general, do you think we're being ignored, or do you think they're just waiting here?
I mean, I would prefer to see somebody on each of those councils just to be represented. I did read, you know, that what Charlotte had said, and supposedly they're talking to everybody. But I know when I worked at Channel 13, and we would try to get pieces on Broadway, it's a shame that, you know, so, I mean, now things have changed. You get to see pieces on CBS on Broadway. But boy, when I was there 10 or more years ago, you know, Broadway was at the bottom of the pile, and cabaret was below that. So I do think we should have a seat at the table. I truly do. And I think there's going to have to be so many steps put in place. I mean, are you going to take people's temperature? Are everybody going to still have to wear a mask? You know, we don't know when it's going to be, or if, you know, how it all will pan out. And I mean, I want to go back as soon as we can, but I also want to go back when it's safe. I almost see that maybe the restaurants will come back in a faster way, but in a smaller way, like smaller groups and more space between tables, and the restaurants and the theaters always worked hand in hand. You know, dinner and theater. So I think there's so many pieces to the puzzle that have to happen before, you know, everybody's going to be wanting to flock to the theater. I mean, originally I was thinking, well, it'd be great if it was September. Now you're thinking it'd be great if it's sometime next year.
So, Jamie, I just want to pop back 1 second to what you said about our Broadway's involvement with government and having representation. Whether we do or we don't, Stefan, do you think there's an opportunity for theater to make an argument that they actually need support from the government, the federal and state and city government?
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And the theater brings so much revenue into both, you know, the city and the state, and all the ancillary things that go along with it. The transportation to get there, the eating dinner before or after, so many things, the clothes that you buy to go to the theater. It's such a ripple effect.
Yes, there's a domino effect when theater is in operating of all of the businesses that surround theater. Stefan, you wanted to say something about the governmental help?
I'm just going to say, I don't see how theater can be overlooked for very long when you start talking about governmental aid at the city, the state, and the federal, certainly the city and the state level. I mean, it's such an important economic driver in the city. So, I mean, with the de Blasio task force, I don't see how, at some point he's going to involve the theater community. He's going to have to. It's too important.
You think?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Right. Yeah, I just, I think right now they're focused on, just doing what they need to do to make sure that we don't have another spike, right? And it's much more focused on the health side, and I think that's just where the focus is now. It's less about how do we get the economy going, how do we get the entertainment economy going in particular. I think that's still, a couple steps down on the priority list, but I think once we sort of get comfortable or more comfortable on a purely public health level the focus is going to quickly turn to the economy, and Broadway's too important a piece of that.
So let's talk about what the streaming idea, because I told Kurt I'd circle back to that, because I think it's something that everybody on this panel can speak to. Okay, and to me, there's a lot of issues related to streaming, right? If you're kind of creating a theatrical experience and you're streaming it, there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can shoot 3-camera shoot of a Broadway show and put it up there. You can create your own theatrical experience. You can have, do what's happening now where artists are just doing it on their own pretty much. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Andy, let's ask you whether you think this kind of thing will actually work and generate an audience, and then let everybody weigh in on that.
I think it will work as it works. I don't know, is it preferable? I don't, that's something else. Will it work? It'll work. But I think from what I'm understanding, even in, so I have to direct a show in Japan this fall, and they are looking this whole entire summer into the fall to be streaming shows. I think it's just a language that we're going to develop. I think that it's kind of awkward. It has an awkward start, but I think as time passes and as it's done more, I think we're just going to be a lot more accustomed to it because we want it. We just want it. We will miss the medium, and we if we can't go see it, there's going to be a point where we're just oversaturated with everything that we're seeing online. Anyways, I think we're just going to get to a point where it's going to be another language that we're going to learn.
Well, the shows that had already been filmed, for Broadway HD or for the National Theater, I watched I had seen One Man, Two Governors originally in London and here, and it was fun to watch it, on a computer screen. Things that have already been filmed, that's one thing, but how do you film something new? That's a different thing. And to do it this way in squares, you don't have the same interaction, and you can't go to a Broadway house and film it now. You know what I mean? It's like, if it was done in the past, great. And anything that was filmed for Lincoln Center was filmed for archival purposes. It's not really filmed. It's like one camera in the back. It's not the same interaction. It's not close-ups. It's archival, and it's very different.
Yeah, at the end of the day, nothing is going to take the place of people coming together, having an experience. Theater is meant to be a live, communal, community experience. I mean, period. That it just is. That's what theater is. It's live. And I watched this weekend Benedict Cumberbatch. I watched Frankenstein this weekend, the National Theater, and it was an amazing production. Danny Boyle directed it. Benedict Cumberbatch was in it. It was incredible. But all I kept saying was, "Damn, I wish I was there." Yeah. I just wish I was there. And to get back to how from what I understand, how people will do it, it's the same thing. Will we be playing in football will we be watching football in stadiums that are empty this year on television? There will be a way where we might be able to get back into the theater. We might be able to film certain things without an audience. And then that goes to subscribers or patrons as a pay-per-view kind of model for people who really want to crave seeing a play or a musical in some ways. I think that we're going to see a lot of smaller cast, 2-person plays, maybe 3-person. Small ensembles, monologues, 1-person shows, those kinds of things. But again, nothing to me is going to take the place of being there live.
Nina, is that economically viable? can it actually happen, not only in terms of making arrangements with the, you know, actors or whoever it may be, but also making arrangements to broadcast it, then actually having it be kind of commercially viable?
Not in my experience. I don't think anybody's interested in doing it to make any money. It would just be to sort of keep the fire going. The
Yeah, it
good
seems
news,
like a lot of work, right?
the good news,
A lot of work.
but it's a tremendous amount of work. And as Jamie said, it's like there are the shows that are in the can that are filmed well, like the National Theater things, and the things that are not intended to be shown, like Lincoln Center, because I've heard that idea come up, and I don't want anything I've ever worked on from Lincoln Center shown. That's not the point. But anything that was running when it shut down, how do we live stream it? How do we go put the show up again and then live stream it to how many people, how many times? That doesn't make up for the 1,700 people 8 times a week that come live to see the theater. I mean, the good news to me is that I think that because all of the live streaming things, as well as the really delightful benefits that I've watched and all those things, which are a great use of this technology, all of it, just as Kurt said, makes you want to get back in the buildings. So I feel confident that when we can, that the business will be there for us and that the people will be there for us, because they're not going to say, if they're theater fans, they're not going to say, I'm just going to stay home and watch the Sondheim benefit on Zoom. They're not. They'll be back. Just the question is when.
You know, we see that a number of states are handling all of this differently than New York, for, you know, because they're not really seeing the, you know, the onslaught of the virus. Does anybody want to weigh in on whether the road shows are going to be dealt with differently than Broadway ultimately will?
They will. The touring Broadway will all be dealt with differently because every venue is different. I mean, I think it's going to be a challenge because you deal with the protocol of health and safety, and then you move once a week, or if you're a bigger show, 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, you have to deal with it all over again. So I think that my instinct is that the shows that move less frequently will be the first to come back than the shows that are like one-nighters, one-weekers. But I think that it's going to be easier to open a show in, I don't know, pick a state, not New York.
Missouri.
To open a show in New York. Missouri, yes, good state, Kurt. But the trick is going to be, you know, you don't want to put out a tour. If you have to bring the company back and retack and put your show back on, you need to make sure that you have tour weeks booked consecutively. You can't say, oh, I have these weeks booked in Missouri and Missouri's open, but then I have weeks booked in Michigan and Michigan's not open. And then I had, you know, it's a complicated jigsaw puzzle.
Stefan, you had something to add?
I was just actually going to go back just for a second on the alternative media, the streaming, you know, and I just wanted to say, and I completely agree with everything that had been said, that, you know, a recording of theater is never going to replace the live experience, and that it's never going to replace the revenues from 8 shows a week. But I just wanted to add that I'm in the middle of 4 live capture deals right now, including 2 that were for shows that had recordings in the can, so to speak, from, you know, 4 years ago. In one case, it was footage that was shot as B-roll, but they had enough footage that they were able to edit it into something that could actually be for public consumption. You know, it's higher quality than just the Lincoln Center archival recording. And there's just an interesting confluence right now, because you have all of these new streaming services, you know, coming into being, right? You have HBO Max going online, you have Peacock going online, you have Disney Plus, and all of those streamers are very hungry for content. And I'm seeing that they are, you know, actively looking for live captures, and, you know, they are willing to pay a profit. You know, those streamers are willing to, you know, overpay at this point to get the content. So that is actually an opportunity for a show right now that's making zero money from live performance to actually get some money in the door. And
when they get the content, though, do they have the rights?
Well, the producers in that case have to, and this goes to what Nina was saying, it's not an easy task, right? The general managers and the producers have to go out and make deals with all of the creative team members. Everybody whose work or whose performance shows up in that live capture has to get paid for it. But there are parameters for those deals. It's not impossible to make those deals. And, it's all of those things are underway on each of these 4 deals that I'm talking about.
Okay, so let's go for 1 second, because I said I would get to nonprofits. So let's just talk really quickly about that, because we're talking about Broadway, which, has a large number of houses, but then you've got probably, twice as many theaters that are in New York City, and then you take the rest of the country that are not-for-profits, and they are truly struggling. I know from hearing some phone calls that they've all shut all their productions. They rely on production somewhat for revenue, but they also have a lot of, benefactors, and those benefactors are connected to paying for tickets. They buy, at a certain price, they buy access. So that's gone. And I think I'm quite concerned about the survival of not-for-profits. So I just wanted to hear what other people think. Anyone who wants, just jump right in.
I think that from what I'm understanding, that the theaters that were functioning at a very tight margin are possibly not all going to make it out on the other side. But I also think that one of the things that a bigger not-for-profit has is they have a bigger structure. On commercial theater, every show is its own individual little startup. The not-for-profits have a structure. They have a season, they have a staff, they have a space, they have a theater that they own or rent or live in. If they have the financial wherewithal, it seems to me a little, I don't want to say easier, because none of it's easy, to take what they were doing this year and shift it to next year, because it's an ongoing process, as opposed to the commercial theater, which is kind of catch as catch can. So, shows that are in development, or shows that were in tech when we shut down, or shows that are in the middle of the process may not be able to start up again. And the shows that haven't started at all may lose their momentum. But I do think that with the benefactors drying up, ticket sales drying up, charitable contributions drying up, people, losing morale, I do think a lot of the not-for-profits are gonna struggle with that.
It's going to be harder to raise, charitable funds, just like it's going to be harder to raise money for commercial projects too. It's just, if you had 100 things on a list of what could go wrong with a Broadway show, this would not be on that list.
Right.
It wouldn't have been until now. Pandemic was never on the list of things that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah, agreed. So
we thought the sushi poisoning with Jeremy Piven, I thought that was the thing on the list that I'd never have to face again. But, and that certainly wasn't on the list. And we made a profit on Speed the Plow.
So since we're moving toward winding this down, I just wanted to ask everybody if you can think for 1 second and tell me what you think the best thing is that can come out of this this shutdown, and what is the best case scenario for live theater to come back? You can answer either of those questions. Let's start with Andy.
This goes back to something I was about to say about the not-for-profits. I'm really interested in engaging with the not-for-profits from my community that are dear to me. So I'm from Miami originally. There's the Actors Playhouse that's there. They need a lot of support. They're very afraid of losing their donors, and they're going to be doing a production of, though they're scheduled to be doing a production of On Your Feet in the fall. And I want to do everything possible to make sure that they are supported in not only putting up a great production that could bring an audience back, but also, you know, how can I assist them in raising money and using my community, using my friends, doing everything possible to reconnect. So I think if we're connecting as community, but just, you know, picking a place that you're going to champion and taking responsibility for that place and doing everything you can. So I think that's something that for me that I would like to see is I think more connection to the places that really need it.
Does anyone want to tackle my question?
Well, I mean, I'm involved with Primary Stages. Our last show ended before March 12th, like the week before Charles Bush's the Confession of Lily Dare. We were moving from the Cherry Lane back to 59 East 59. We were supposed to start in the fall. Of course, that's getting to look very unlikely. Now, you know, maybe they can take that whole season and move it to a later date. But we're still confined to the weeks that we have at 59 East 59, and it'll be a lot of money will have to be raised to keep it viable and going. And, you know, and even the office space, forget about, you know, there's all these things that keep a nonprofit going, the people that work there and paying for their offices and keeping the day-to-day. So, I mean, I don't want to see Primary Stages or any nonprofit go under. I would, they do great work, and so much of Broadway product comes from the nonprofits. The band's visits started at the Atlantic. I mean, Rent started at New York Theater Workshop. So we need them. They're a real great breeding ground, and they're going to be dependent on donors. And their galas, which they've all had to cancel all their galas, that was a moneymaker. That's not revenue coming back in.
All right. So what is the best thing, guys, that can come out of this terrible situation? Who wants to take that? Stefan, you look like you wanted to.
Yeah, that's it. I got a couple of things that it would be, you know, there would be some positive in this utter negative. The first is if a new economic model is arrived at, where shows can get up and can run much less expensively, right? That is going to be very good for shows that historically have not been producible on Broadway, right? Because they were deemed too risky. It would be great if a model is arrived at where those kinds of riskier, more artistically adventurous projects can get to Broadway, because there's now a model in place where they can run, you know, be mounted and run more cheaply. So I think that could be a great result, right? It could ultimately lead to stuff getting to Broadway, which did not before. And then I think the other good positive that could come out of this is that if people discover more ways to consume theater, right? Whether it's the live captures, the streaming, whether it's audio, you know, I represent Audible, and they're doing all kinds of audio recordings of plays now. You know, if that leads to a wider audience for theater in general, that could, you know, 3-4 years down the road lead to more people going into theaters, you know, so it ultimately could expand the audience for live theater.
I think that we're going to be in a very interesting, for a long time, everything is going to be localized in a lot of ways, you know, or nationalized to a certain degree. We're not going to, you know, I loved going to London all the time to see shows, and coming back to New York or going to California or going wherever. But I think that we're going to be in a period of time right now where being global is not going to be where it's at. And so focusing on New York, focusing on the States, focusing on how we can collaborate around the country, and then thinking about, okay, I have this show that I'm about to do on Broadway, but there needs to be a production in London or Korea or wherever it is. Where can we make theater? Looking at all the opportunities where actually I'd rather open my show in Korea right now, since it's the only place that you can do a show. So, and what does that audience want? But I do think that we're in things are not going to go back the way that they ever were. And we just need to figure out what that new model is and what that new normal is going to be. And we'll hopefully collaborate better and communicate better and be able to build a better community for us all.
Nina, do you have what is the best thing that could come out of this situation here? Do you have an answer for that?
I don't think I have anything different to say. I think that the community aspect of it is always key, and I think it will remain key.
I mean, I think a short-term benefit might be, and we didn't really talk about this at all, might be how much development there is going to be now, because there's going to be no live theater for a while. So there will be a backlog of hopefully great stuff that's ready and itching to get to theater. But
I already feel like there was a backlog.
Yeah, true.
So.
And the question is, like, what's happening now? Is stuff still getting developed? Everybody's sitting at home.
We can't get into some of it. We did a workshop, over Zoom, but you can't do a workshop of a musical over Zoom and really be able to. You need to be in a room. Actors need to be able to communicate with each other. You need to stage things. You need to get out. You can't just, there's work that can be done, but not the kind of work that really needs to get up. Because you even making a record right now, a cast album, I can't get into the studio to make a cast album. Getting 30 people into a recording studio with an orchestra, it's not going to happen right now. So you have to think about how you're going to do that. So it's a complicated time to do the real work and workshops that need to be done.
I think once we do get back in, we'll be so grateful and hungry for what's up there on the stage and what's out there to take in and enjoy. I mean, I long for the day that I can be back in a theater and have an evening planned. Like I used to go out every night, dinner and theater, dinner and a cabaret, or, sometimes twice in a day. I will be so grateful. I may have taken a lot of this for granted. I'll never take it for granted again, ever. And I think that everyone will be so appreciative of what is up on that stage. Because it's so hard.
You have segued beautifully into the final question that CCFP has asked me to ask, Jamie, which is, since we're not all out every night seeing theater, what are we doing every night? And at every one of these panels that CCFP has, we ask the panelists to just tell us of either a book or something visual, hi Eli, that you are watching. So Andy, way out there, and what are you watching out there?
I'm finishing Game of Thrones finally. The whole entire thing. But I want to say, Jamie, I was at dinner tonight, and it was the weirdest thing. I was around people eating, and it was the strangest experience being in that energy after months of quarantine. But I've been watching Game of Thrones, catching up on Game of Thrones, and then to be sleepy, The Crown.
All right, Nina.
I've never really been a TV watcher, so I've just been reading a lot, and we play games. My family plays games, card games.
All right. Jamie.
Well, I'm alone with my cats, and so I've been watching a lot of TV. I mean, binging all kinds of series. I pay for all this stuff every month. I never got to see it. So finally I'm getting use of HBO and Showtime, Netflix and Hulu and everything. And I just sent away for Alan Zweibel's new book. And I thought, what's taking so long? And then I went back on the computer and I never pressed complete order, which is something I'm having to learn of how to do everything online, which is very new to me. And I'm cooking again, which is like, okay, but who wants to cook for just yourself? I hate that. I'd rather cook for friends. I cook and bake and I give it away to the people in the building.
All right, we're going to go with cooking as your answer on that. Kurt.
There's a lot of wine drinking, and especially because I make wine. So
Are you getting plug? Wait a minute.
There it
no,
is, Marciano.
Okay.
Anyway,
The wine is delicious. I want everyone to know.
So we're drinking a lot of wine, and you know, I've got my son just turned 16 this past week, so it's a lot of homeschooling, and it's a lot of binge watching on television and cooking.
Stefan, what are you watching?
Well, I've been so busy with work because there's so many development deals happening. I also haven't been catching up on my TV. I've read some wildly entertaining.
None of your partners are listening. What do you want?
It's called.
We've been, yeah, exactly. We've really been. I have a first grader and a fourth grader, so we're making our way through the 9 Star Wars movies weekend by weekend.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm watching. Since I wanted such an upper, I've been watching Ricky Gervais' Afterlife, which it's quite well done. So,
awesome.
Arie, turning it over to you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys so much for everybody tuning in. I thought this panel discussion was absolutely amazing. I'm excited. Hopefully we'll get back to live theater sometime soon. I know it may take a while, but I know everybody's itching to get back in the theater and watch this stuff. I don't think AR or anything artificial, unfortunately, is ever going to take the place of live theater, which makes it so special. Anyhow, thank all of you. Once again, Creative Community for Peace is a nonprofit. So if you'd like to donate or support our work, please go to ccfpeace.com or creativecommunityforpeace.com. You can also sign up for our email list there to stay in touch with everything we have coming up. We have a number of really great panels coming up over the next 2 weeks. And besides that, we hope everybody is staying safe, and we'll see you guys soon. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks again.